Welcome. We're back in session with your host Jay of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast. Now let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast with me, your host Jay. And today we have.
My name is Kara Whitley.
Thank you for joining me. How's your day going so far?
It's good. It's Thursday. Hoping to get to Friday, 3-day weekend. So we're getting there.
Yes, very much looking forward to the 3-day weekend. I don't know how teachers do it. I've literally been asking, how do you guys find time to sleep? Like, where is the sleep fitting into the schedule?
It doesn't. It doesn't. Summer, spring break.
I'm definitely looking forward to the break. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Kara Whitley. I am actually from Springfield, Illinois, so not super far away. Went to U of I and then never really left. Worked for a year elsewhere, came back here, and then I've been teaching at a local high school, Central High School, which is just down the road, since 2005.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you've been there.
Been there for a minute. Yeah.
Love that. I was 3.
I know.
You know, honestly, when my students tell me like, oh, I wasn't even born when that was, I was like, oh, okay, all right. I don't care, actually.
Yeah.
Make me feel old, I don't care. But yeah, so the first question that I like to ask all my guests is, with the point that you are in your life right now and in your career, what did you think of social studies before this point versus what do you think about social studies now throughout your journey as a teacher?
Well, so I'm actually an English teacher.
Same.
I've never formally taught social studies until this year. Of course, it's kind of social studies related. So I think formerly, I guess the conception would have been very much like fact-based and history. I guess social studies is synonymous with history, probably neglecting a bunch of the other disciplines within it, and just a very like traditional kind of the way I grew up, history classes, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then now it's evident that it is far more diverse, and I'm far more interested, and I think students are too, in sociology and psychology, and Dr. Wilson's really helped me expand on the idea of research and what it is and what it's not, and what it's not limited to. Like the English teacher sort of like formal research papers are great, but they're not only, that's not all it is. So it's become more vibrant and more alive, I think.
Oh, I love that. More vibrant, more alive. That is definitely a great way to put it, because I've been trying to like, hone in on that idea and like expand the idea that everything is social studies and social studies is everything.
Yeah.
So I like that. It's vibrant.
Yeah.
I also think that is a way better way to like explain it and describe it to engage more students into social studies and history, because so many students hate it for the reasons that you've already said, and I think that's great. And also, I feel like English is
I agree. Yeah,
because you definitely need social studies to fund English, but you
Right.
definitely need English to fund social studies.
sure.
So I think that's cool. And you teach an AP Black History class.
So it's the new AP African American Studies class. It's
Okay.
the one that's, like been in the news and this and that. So last school year, I think they had maybe 60 schools that were able to do it. College Board was the one who kind of issued the invites, and I don't know their criteria or whatnot. This year, there's like somewhere between 600 and 800 schools, and
wow.
our district was offered the chance. And so, like the first step was, okay, are we going to do it? And then who's going to teach it? And then who's going to take it? And there were a few stumbling blocks, but we have a course up and running. It's 20 students.
Okay.
We're hoping for next year it will be more. So yeah, that was also a little bit of a learning curve too, because it's not technically just an English class and not just a history class. It's a combination, interdisciplinary studies class. So, but we actually have 2 students who drive over Centennial every day
Really?
to take the class. And so that's kind of nice. And the goal, I think, next year is to have sections at both schools. Which would be lovely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, this question is the same as the first question, but it's
Uh-huh.
more catered to your experience.
Okay.
So, what did you think about Black history before this moment in your career versus what do you think about Black history now?
Oh man. Okay, so let's see. I guess prior,
Mm-hmm.
um, it felt very like the same few facts all the
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you would read these two books and you would study these two people, and a very limited sort of scope and a really small narrative. And I think the one thing that, going through this course and doing a lot of the readings and really trying to prepare for it is just the murkiness of
Mm-hmm.
what people actually might think they know, and then some of the realities and the dialogue and the rich discussion and things that are actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess it always felt very linear before, like first this happened and then this happened, and
Yeah.
then things were great after civil rights, and now here we are, and things are bad every now and then, but like mostly we're okay. The we, right,
Mm-hmm.
being like especially as a white person, the important note there. And so we've had a lot of discussions too, which have been really interesting about like what is actual progress and
Mm-hmm.
what what are the narratives, what are the counter narratives, who's telling a story, who's making the history, and who's writing the things. And I think just the richness of how multifaceted everything is,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the way that it's fascinating and resilient and traumatizing all at once to go
Mm-hmm.
through it with students and
Mm-hmm.
um, think about and get engaged in the dialogue, and then also it's all still so relevant.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It's now.
Yeah, I like even in my schooling experience, I knew what Black history was in my household because
Mm,
I feel like I was learning things every day. Like I was getting Black history from my family every day, not even just from actual like academic teaching, but just seeing what they were doing.
mhm,
Like it because my grandma, she's been a teacher for like decades now,
mhm.
just like my uncle. He's been in the education field for about like almost 2 decades
Yeah,
now. So watching my family position themselves within like my small context of
yeah,
history was very important to me, which was very jarring and very different when you're learning about it in school because it's like, okay, someone from Africa, then you have
mhm.
slavery, and then you guys get free from slavery, woo, and then you guys go through harsh racism again, very traumatic, and then the civil rights movement, woo, and then now look at you guys, rappers and
Mm,
athletes and talk show hosts and dancers and
mm.
things like that, and sometimes you guys may be academics, but it just depends. And then you got Barack Obama in there, and it's like you guys are doing great right
Yep.
now, but I feel like I didn't really get the nuance sense until I got to high school, which even then I feel very fortunate about because I know like a lot of my peers sit in high school. Like they didn't really get
Yeah.
that nuance, like longer version of like what Black history was supposed to look like because we all talk about the same people over and over and over again. And it took me a while too to not feel guilty about saying that because I'm like,
Mhm.
wait, if I'm saying, oh, we're always talking about Rosa Parks, we're always talking about Malcolm X, we're always talking about Dr. King, like we're always talking about Jim Crow, we're always talking about these things, it felt like I was dismissing those events, and it felt like
Yeah.
I was dismissing those people. But I'm like, they exist within the story, but there are also other people and other
Yeah.
things that exist. And me saying that does not dismiss the things that they've done. It's just understanding that there is so much more to the story than
Right.
what is being presented, which is very difficult
Yeah.
when you're trying to present that to other adults in the room and they're like, "What? Why would you want to go outside of that mold?" And I'm
Right.
like, yeah, because I don't want to always think
Yeah.
about me and my ancestors being slaves. Like I want to think about like I know there's so many other things that we have done. Like, I like sports, but I don't always want to
Hmm.
think about us being basketball players or, I like
Yeah.
music, but I don't want to always talk about us being rappers. I think there's just so many other things to think about, to talk about, especially when it comes to the way that I want to motivate my students as a Black educator. What does it mean to push them forward to go into STEM? Or to go
Mm.
into fashion, or to go into art, or to go into business, or to go into nursing, go in
Yeah.
their doctor programs, things like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you said that too about growing up. And one of my major hesitancies in teaching the course is that I'm a white woman. So the lived experience isn't necessarily there. And yet, it's interesting because discussions about staffing and like who's going to teach what,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I don't, you know, there's this notion of on one hand, like it's a Black history course or an African American studies course. Maybe a middle-aged white woman is the best choice. On the other hand, oftentimes I feel like people, and I could be speaking out of turn here, but I feel like sometimes people who aren't white are like, well, you're this, so you got to teach that course. You can only teach this course, or like by default, whether, and so there's potentially a burden or an expectation that I think white teachers don't always have. It's like you can, but you don't have to feel obligated, but you don't have to. But I also think it's really important that it doesn't become centered in whiteness, especially with lived experience. And so it's been an interesting thing. And so we've just kind of tried to be open about the situation and how we're all situated within it. And the nice part is a lot of the students I had known from last year, and you know, they're really honest with me, and I think I can be honest with them about when, you know, I need to just step back and listen, and they can take over, and it's a space of sharing. But it's definitely an element, right?
Yeah. Are you reading my mind about the question?
I don't know. Am I?
A little bit, actually. No, but I was gonna ask you, like, could you get into that more about what does it mean as a white woman? What does that mean within whiteness? How do you position yourself as an AP, African American history teacher? Like, what are the challenges that are there that other people may not think of? What is the ways that you do allow your students to come to the forefront in the classroom and not allow yourself to be offended by, like, I know that people are seeing me as a white woman, but that do you understand?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of questions. And then that, so I think your first one was more about just sort of like the positioning as a white woman. Yeah, I struggle with it a lot because I will say this, not to the detriment of my other classes, right? But I'm almost putting like all of my time and energy into this because it feels so important to get it right. I don't know that there is a way to get anything right. But, and I don't know if this is just as a white woman or not, but one thing that's been really different is that sometimes it can feel in other classes like I need to cover this or teach this. But it feels really important, even like you were talking about, not to make any of the topics we cover something to just be covered. You know what I mean? Like it's so much more important than just like cover or lesson 3.2 or less, because there's this very clear like scope and sequence. And so trying to make it real and work on it with sensitivity and honesty, and also recognizing, I think it can be awkward in a lot of ways. There have certainly been times, there are a number of students who are super open and honest, and I think we have a good rapport. I know I think they can trust me. I can certainly trust them to be honest and critical when they need to be, but you know, there was a day where someone was like, no offense, but like, I feel like if it was just a room full of Black people, it would be a little bit different in the conversations, but like at one point they said to me, like, we feel like sometimes you just tiptoe around things because you don't want to say the right thing or you're not really sure. And, you know, so we just, I guess, talk about it honestly as we come. I do think it's a space where, you know, I don't know if I'll always be the person who teaches the course. And I think it would certainly benefit from someone whose lived experience is different than mine. You know, so I don't know the answer to that, but I was kind of the one who was there this year, and I'm truly giving it all I have. And the students, I think, are as well. And it's been lovely. It's been amazing and challenging all at the same time.
Because I know you mentioned that you're also one of the veteran teachers at your school too, right?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I've been there for 20 years, so it's like I've been there for a minute, right? And I don't know, I was reflecting with some colleagues the other day too about so many things we've gotten wrong in the past. Just, you know, like you just maybe aren't aware at the time. And I've learned so much. And I also I try to stay kind of like aware of what's happening in the community. And there's just a lot of dynamics. There are a lot of things going on at any given moment in the district. And I think our district does a good job of talking about race. It's not something that people generally don't talk about. I just don't know where that always goes.
Yeah, okay. And then circling back, you know, with talking about race and things like that, when your students do say things like, you know, I feel like if we were in a room of all Black people, conversations would be different. what methods do you use? Like, like, what reflection tools do you use to stop yourself from saying, this is not necessarily a personal attack against me. This is not something to be offended by, but this is something to make sure I reflect on to go forth in each class and make sure they feel as safe with me as possible.
That's a good question. I think honestly, I'm thinking of like three students in particular, right? Because they're the ones, you know how like there's just a classroom dynamic, and there are three students in particular. I have no problem saying like whatever's on their mind, and
Yeah.
I think they just hopefully know at this point that I won't be offended.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they preface it with like, no offense, no offense,
Yeah.
and they're not wrong. I mean, like that's
Mhm.
the thing. I don't think it's my prerogative in that place to dismiss what they've said as
Mhm.
untrue or not valid. They're right, and
Yeah.
you know, like I think it's just that. Um, and maybe that's what it is too, is that the class seems more like it's not like a teacher in a class. It's a like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, there are all these ideas. And I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time studying them, and I was given a bunch of resources, and a bunch of people in the community have pointed me to things. So let me share them with you. And then like you find some stuff to do with them
Mhm.
rather than just like, this is what we're doing sort of all the time, every day.
Mhm.
Um, we were struggling one of the other day. We were just talking about seniors, right? So we were
Yeah.
struggling one of the other days, and I was like, man, you got to be honest with me here. Like, is it me? Is it you? Is it that you're seniors? And most of them were like, we're just seniors. And this other student's like, no, it's all of them.
It's all
Yeah, it's all of them. I was like, I knew I could count on you for that.
It's definitely a combination
Yeah.
of all things, especially when you're getting to this point of like, I'm ready to get out of here. This is an AP course. There's a lot going on. I'm just like, it's just so much
Yeah,
to take in with it.
it is.
And even so, with that, circling back to to the third question I
Sure.
asked
Yeah.
you, a multitude of questions. How do you allow your students to position themselves in the classroom those days where you step back and you're saying, I'm going to let them take the forefront? What does that look like?
Honestly, it looks a lot like just kind of open discussion. I do a lot of like throwing questions out, and then they just kind of like go. Um, I've been working with Dr. Wilson, who has been wonderful and has offered to come in. And so he kind of got us going with circles.
Mm-hmm.
And so establishing spaces of trust where people are, going out sharing about their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a banter that happens, sometimes maybe a lot of banter. And then there's other things. And like we certainly have a class dynamic, but I do think that, and that's not something I do in my other classes.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think having that space first where they get to, I don't know, own the space, or we're more equal in that space or something, and like trying to get rid of the power structures there. Um, but also just truly listening and like say, I think I don't think they're ever looking at me as someone who has an answer. It's oftentimes just
Mm-hmm.
if anything, it's just questions, 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 right? Like there was a pretty vibrant discussion, maybe it was the start of the month. And the question for the circle was just like, what are your thoughts on Black History Month? And like super, super open-ended. And it just kind of went, like it just kind of keeps going. And there are students in the class who are not Black. The majority of the class is, but there are a few white students and others too. So so far, I think everybody's been able to be open and honest. And I think too, you just can't get wishy-washy, and like you got to sometimes just acknowledge things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like they laugh at me sometimes, but like you're studying the literary movement, NEGRO is just a word I'm not going to say. And yet it's in a lot of titles, right? And it's in the word, and I'm just not. And they're like, like sometimes it's just like it's the awkward elephant. Like there's a slide that says this movement, and you're like, well, it's up there, but like
you see it.
Yeah, you see it.
You
It's
see
there.
it. It's there.
Or like skip over it or whatever. So yeah, there's always those things, and I guess I embrace the awkwardness or not ignore it. Maybe I don't know.
I think that's sometimes the only thing that you can do, especially with high schoolers, because they know how to up the ante and
Yes.
we're just even more awkward. But I like the fact that you allow them to like position themselves like in the front of the classroom. You like take a back seat because that's something that I'm trying to learn how to do. Like, yeah, my expertise on everything, but I want to make sure that my students know that they're the teacher and the student, and I'm the teacher and the student, and we can all work together in a collaborative space. But it also makes me think about like my high school experience because I've had like different experiences with my classrooms, like English and history and things like that. And there are some times where it felt like sometimes not even in the classroom, but in the school as a whole where our voices were not heard.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they would say these inspirational quotes and say like, you guys are like the driving force of change and like you guys are the voice of our future and we care about everything that you say and do. And we're like, do you really care? Like,
Yeah.
you're just saying this and you want to say that we're family, but we don't feel like family. Like,
Yeah.
even like I was a part of student council all 4 years, and it was like I remember one year, I felt like I was fighting tooth and nail to get Black History Month to be recognized for that
Wow.
year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, which is really insane because it was like the year before, I was like, we did a whole Black History Month town hall, like we had this, and that. And it just felt like it was not taken seriously. It felt like our identity was like, it didn't matter that year. Like
Yeah.
they're like, oh, do this and do that. And it was optional things that people didn't have to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you're making it seem like this is something optional, like this is not our identity, like this is not something that is important to talk about,
Right.
then what does that say? Like what does that mean in the sense of like curriculum, in the sense of community, in the sense
Yeah.
of how you fit yourself in our community? And I come from a community-based educating household. They believe in like they know the family, so moms, dads, grandmas, aunties, uncles, brothers, sisters.
Yeah.
My grandma saw generations of
Yeah.
families. And my godmoms have too. They've taught generations of families because they understand how important it is to not only situate themselves within the school as authority figures, but also like, I am your family too, in whatever way you need me to be that. I can be your friend too, in whatever way you need me to be that. I am your support system in whatever way we need to run the school and function in a better way. And I don't know, you talked about like using like community as a sense to like fund what you're doing. So what does your community, based pedagogy and things like that look like?
Are you talking about classroom community or outside community or both and how they overlap?
Both,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
that's an interesting question. So classroom community has really been trying to just like get to a space where all the conversations can happen and, bring in their own like personalities and who gets along with who and who's, like friends with who at what moment in time or not what moment in time. And so on a daily basis, I think I would like to think that everybody feels taken care of in that space and they have their needs met, not necessarily by me, but that they can come in, they can be honest about what they need and what they're willing to do that day. And it's interesting that you mentioned the community-based piece because I think that's one of my bigger insecurities about the class is that, and I don't know if it's just about whiteness, but also, like the outside community, I don't know that I'm the one who's as tapped in as potential others in our community are. So one of the first things I did, and I have to ask you your opinion on this too, is right because I want to be cognizant of making sure that they have access to lots of voices and lots of lived experiences, and I can't offer that. But I also don't want to burden other people by all like you come help and you come help and you come help, right? And I've reached out to a ton of people and everybody's been like, yes, we'll come, we'll help, we'll do these things, we'll be in community. And so I'm hoping that, like being able to see so many people, and everybody's like, contact this person, contact this person, contact this person. And so like the community kind of came to me, for which I'm really grateful. And I think the students will really benefit from that. But yeah, I do always often wonder if it's like not a double standard, but a burden, right? To constantly be asking for others to come in and fill the voids or the differences. And I'm hoping that it's more of a like all together, we work through stuff. But yeah, it's been so Dr. Wilson has been coming in. We were talking about like Black student life and Black college experiences. And like, that's not my thing. And so there were 4 wonderful women from the district leadership who were like, we'll be in. And they came in and they led this like circle. They talked. It was a very frank and open conversation. And I think everybody got some really good insight about it. It's like, come back, can you come back? And, it's really fun. And then right now, like at U of I even, there was a librarian that we had randomly connected with. She's like, okay, I'll pull some archives. So she's going to pull us some archival material about like restaurants and protests on Green Street. So we're going to field trip over there. And then, it's like, oh, hey, there's the Black Joy exhibit that's happening on Spurlock. And someone's like, okay, I know that person. So we're going there. So like I hope going to be able to be in the community, both the university community and through some other resources elsewhere. But people have been very generous in filling voids that I may not be able to fill, I guess, as the teacher, so to speak, of the class.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because I think it's different when like you're asking the students themselves to be like, hey, fill this void.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's when it becomes more of a burden when you're making the students themselves be like, oh, this is my experience. This is my trauma. This is not my trauma. This is what I relate to. This is
Yeah.
what I don't relate to. Because sometimes it does get tiring as a student when it's like, I'm here to learn. I'm here to talk about my experiences, but now I'm expected to also teach myself at the same time. It's like, yes, having that space to position himself in front of the classroom is one thing, but being forced to like put their own experiences out there because it's not enough without them doing that, I think that's the burden. But going in the community and asking people like, can you come in, like, can I have you as a resource in my classroom? I feel like that's great because so often, and I've had this conversation many times, that when it comes to Black education, when it comes to urban education within Blackness, when it just comes to dealing with Black students and Black academics in general, so often we go outside of their communities. Like, this is where the greatness is happening. Like, my grandma, my uncle, they've served in CPS on the south side of Chicago, within the inner city, I guess you could call it. And it's like a lot of the times, like, oh, what's in Hyde Park? What's in downtown Chicago? But what about the histories that have been there? Like, what about the Regal Theater? That was like a very lively theater. Like when my grandparents were growing up, like the Temptations came there and this group came there and these events happen here. It's like these places might be boarded up now, or these places you might not see them, but to a lot of generations that are living in those communities, that meant so much to them. And so to bring those folks in and be like, I want you to speak, I think that that is amazing. I don't think that is burdenness. I think that that is a very, great opportunity, and it's a very great method to have because of the fact that they get to see themselves validated within their own community, and they don't have to think like, oh, because like, what does it say when you keep going outside of the place where they live, saying the greatness is here?
Right.
Like the greatness is not where I'm from. Like, I have to leave. I have to go somewhere else. Like when I'm successful, I can't stay here. Like I can't put back into my community because there's nothing here for me. Like there's no greatness here. I'm not of greatness because I come from here. But to see people who could be their neighbor or who live down the street or who works at the store, even if they live a little bit further away, but they can still mirror themselves with that person, I think is a very great and motivating opportunity for them to see themselves as something bigger than just slavery or just bigger than Jim Crow or just bigger than
like I think too, so much of the course is about resistance and reaction and progress and action and direct action, activism. And I haven't been doing that work. Like that's not been my role in the community, for good or for bad, right? And I'm trying to work through that. But so many people have for so long. And so I think localizing it is really kind of interesting too. There have been so many resources about like the district just bought us some books about like the Black Power movement at U of I and how its programs got started and the students that made the change and the, like the newspaper here, which the archivist is going to pull. And then a couple like community activists who were, instrumental in a consent decree lawsuit against the district representing parents on behalf of their students. And, so like there's a speaker who's going to come talk about that, and just so many people already who've been so invested and who are living the work that it's like boiled down into like a course exam description, like the civil rights movement is here's the big five and this and that, but it's like no, it's like these people who have been doing the work and who are in this community and who have made this community so much better than it could have been, and are still working to improve all the problems that we absolutely still have. I hope that the students are learning a fraction as much as I'm learning throughout this whole thing too. But Champaign is a great place. I really like, and I think I hope that students can see the local ties to a lot of the stuff that we've done too, that it just doesn't live in a book.
Definitely.
We haven't even used a book.
Yes, it doesn't just live in a book,
Yeah.
for sure. I think this also goes back to why Dr. Wilson is so great, because in his class, like, and just working with him in general, one thing that I learned that it sounds like you're getting into is what does healing and forgiveness look like? Because you talked about like you hope that your students feel safe and you hope that they can come in the classroom and present themselves however they feel comfortable, however they need to. I can bet like this AP course for African American history is probably a healing space, and it's also for a forgiving space too. So when it comes to like, the safety that you try to create in your classroom, and when it comes to opening up the doors to allow them to present themselves however they feel they need to move through the class, how do you think that works with like healing and forgiveness within like between each other, with you and in, with the curriculum in general?
That's interesting. To think about that a little bit. So I'm going to reframe it around
Mm-hmm.
some of the questions that students have asked, right? So one of
Okay.
the requirements of the course is that each student does an individual research project. So they have to come up with their own research question and and then now technically in the project, they just have to do the project, they have to present it, whatever. Dr. Wilson has pushed me to be like, why are they just doing a project? Like, make it actionable. Like, what are they doing? So what's next, right? Don't just let it live in the space of like, I Googled some things and I read a few articles. So he's really pushed back that, which is amazing, and kind of reframe that. And so I think some of their questions maybe kind of get to that. One student's question has to do with, and I don't have the specifics, why there's such a fascination with Black trauma in film, right? Like, why, just why? And because I think that maybe gets to some of the healing and the problem, not the problem, but the place that I'm sort of like trying to work through is it's hard sometimes to think you ever get past that. Like, are you just stuck in the problem, the problem, the problem? What does it mean to answer that question? Or what if the answers are not uplifting, right? Or things like that, and maybe kind of working through them. But I guess the other thing that Dr. Wilson has kind of helped me show is that moving people to like a space of agitation brings action or progress or whatnot too. So a couple of the other students are asking questions or researching questions about like historical trauma and then how that intertwines with generational trauma or even with like stigmatization of mental health in particular communities or inequitable health outcomes. And so it is right now like they're all in this process of reading about all those topics, after we just did this whole thing about like, because the way the course is set up, it's like you start in ancient Africa. And in some ways it's like glory and pride, and then there's enslavement, but then and so it's like it can easily fall into that. But and I think next year I have a much better sense of, maybe from the students' own, they have given me a better sense of how we can make it more kind of fluid throughout.
Yeah.
And less it's also nuanced too, but they often, some of the questions that we haven't necessarily answered but have been looking for is like, what is liberation, what is freedom, what is progress, and are things ultimately hopeful or not? Like, those are kind of the things that it seems like all of the figures that we've studied or the movements kind of ask those questions too. And so hopefully in their own research they can maybe get to a space where they feel like they have an answer to those.
Yeah. Wow.
That was a lot. I don't know.
No, that was great. That was great. I definitely, it's interesting that you said like, why is there so much trauma depicted? I remember one time I asked my grandpa, like, can you tell me a Black movie that is not centered in trauma? It is just centered in love. Like, and it took him so long to think about it. He brought up one movie, just one.
What was, do you know, remember
Love
what?
Jones
Okay.
is what he said it was. But that's something that I've thought about a lot, is like, in books, in movies, in TV shows, there's always something centered around trauma. And I'm like, yes, that is a lot of our experience. But there's so much more to it. I'm like, why can't we have those silly coming of age movies where it's like, there is no trauma. Like, there is no such thing as like, the hurt and the pain comes from like cringy things. Like, I don't know, somebody embarrassed me on stage and I was trying to run prom queen and I had to run away crying. Like, just like little things like that. Like, where are those moments that we get to focus on just the funny stuff and things like that? And I could think of like a few like Martin, in my jacket, little reference or whatever. Well, I really love that show. Like growing up, like watching it, like being able to just see like funny things happen, like just being able to see like the goofiness of the show and just like have a nice like downtime, nice laugh time with like my family, just watching the show and things like that. And I think those experiences are very important to bring into the classroom when we are learning about what does it mean to come from ancient Africa and beat up these royals and then feel like we've been just stripped away from all of that. But what does it look like now? Like, where does our royalty come from now? Like, what is the richness and the love and the laughter and the joy that we create now, even with all the the trauma and even all the things that we have to focus on. Because I took like an honors African American history class in
Mhm.
my in
Yeah.
high school, and it kind of like mirrored a little bit what you're
Yeah.
talking about, and it just made me think. But I was also very like proud to learn about that
Mhm.
because it went way outside of the scope of like what we typically learn
Yeah.
when it comes to Black history. So I think that that's absolutely amazing. And you definitely threw a lot at me, but I feel like I
Sorry,
threw a
yes.
lot at you with my question. So I feel like I feel like I definitely got a lot out of, the question that I asked and what I
And
wanted
I will
to.
say too, it's not been all like, I'm like, if my students watch this, would they be like, oh, she's just lying, or like like there have been definite critiques, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there have been students who have been comfortable with me like, I'm just not getting anything out of this, or I'm not learning what I wanted to, or it's not what I thought it was going to
Mm-hmm.
be, or it's too much of this. And so like there have certainly been, it sounds very polished.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on the day to day, it's pretty, real and kind of gritty in some ways too. And I was even thinking because you were talking about like your English, background, and I was thinking about the novels that we teach because in English, it's like for a long time it was, I haven't taught Huck Finn and basically since like I
I've
first
never
started to
read
teach
Huck
it, right?
Finn.
But it's all like even if you think about who are the characters who aren't white and how are they represented, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost always, right? Like and so even in literature, not just in film, I'm thinking like in our English classes and whatnot too, and year
Mm-hmm.
in and year out. And then today we watched the Toni Morrison clip where she answers the question about the white gaze. Like, so the
Mm-hmm.
interviewer had asked her, I think it was Bill Moyers, and it was a long time ago, but he was like, okay, you're a really great author. When are you going to write about like
Oh.
non-black people? And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, and she's even revisiting this question all these years later, and she says, until you walk up to, like Tolstoy wrote about race and James Joyce wrote about race, and she kind of flips the question on its head. Until I can walk up into a white author and say, well, when are you going to write about black people?
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't ask that question. So why would you ask it of me? And that led to an interesting discussion too about just, and I think it does tie into sort of the expectations of like creators and even history too, and the way stories are told. And
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I've been like learning how to like as an English major, like within my classes. I know one of my professors used the term like we have learned about old dead white guys for a very long time within our literature. How do we step outside of that zone? And we even talked about like what if we go to a district where we want to revolutionize the
Mm,
curriculum? That's not allowed.
yeah,
Like parents are saying
yeah.
no. Like administration is saying no. Like the district is saying no. How do we like because you even
Mm.
talked about not rebellion.
Like resistance and yeah,
Resistance.
yeah.
Yes. How do you have a quiet resistance? How
Mm.
do you move forward to help your students resist if they are in such a restrictive, setting like that where like you can't teach about like what does it mean to be a Moor in Othello. You can just only read it for what it is.
Mm.
Like what does it mean to read about all of these stories that doesn't talk about blackness, that doesn't talk about the Hispanic community, that doesn't talk about the Asian American community, that doesn't talk about different religious groups, that doesn't talk
Mm.
about how we add stereotypes on the groups that aren't true, that are harmful, and that continue to perpetuate these stereotypes that we continue to push forward in our education system, which ultimately pushes some students out because they're like, I'm not seeing myself mirrored.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do see myself mirrored, I feel horrible about myself.
Mm.
And so it's just very interesting because also here at U of I, it's like being an English major, it was a very white experience
Mm-hmm.
for me. There was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
students that just it was like myself and like two other black students. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in some of my classes, I was the only black student in there. So it's very interesting for me to like be put in the position like I feel like I need to speak up. And I feel like
Mm.
I need to represent a whole community of people that I don't even know. But even then, like, even though it felt like nerve-wracking and it was a lot of pressure, I still felt like it was important to do that because of the mindset that like some of my classmates who are teachers, they may not teach a black person
Mm.
ever again. So what does it mean if they do have to teach it? On the flip side,
Mm.
if they are in a space where they do have to teach about these topics, how will my impact as a black person and as a black student in their classroom push them to be teachers and push them to interact with their
Wow.
students? So these are just very like prominent things, and I'm still even thinking about now, like in the
Yeah.
classrooms that like I'm student teaching in and student observing in, and I'm also learning like with the I know I asked a question about like healing
Yeah.
and forgiveness, like how do I put these things into practice, especially when the students are like, you're trying to gentle teach, and the students are
Mm.
not being gentle students in that moment.
So that's so like my one big frustration with everything related to teaching is theory and like practice. Like I hear these things, some people say like do this or do this. I read the books and then I'm like, but come into my second hour and show me what that looks like, right? Like that's the hard part is there's yeah, theory and practice. And even over the summer I'll go home and be like, this is a great idea. This discussion's gonna be like this. And you go in and just, like
Just
so when you figure it out, tell me because that divide I think is hard. And the
mhm.
other thing I think that you brought up was like being an individual in a system of systems. It's
Mhm.
all systems. And so that is, like even the fact that the course is AP,
Mhm.
College Board is College Board, and people have lots of thoughts about College Board.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, it's the first time we've been able to offer the course because it's all at College Board. It's the
Mhm.
way we were going to be able to get this course to earn honors credit. But like, are you handing over control to them? Because they, like
Mhm.
it's a very rigid, like there's required sources, there's required documents, and you're
Mhm.
free kind of to do whatever you want. Our district actually, because you had spoken to the idea of, restrictive districts, and it's been nothing but support from the district for this course. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of people checking in and saying like, how's it going? What do you need? So that's been amazing too. But it may not always be that way, or other courses may not always be that way too. But it's systems and how you rebel quietly or resist quietly become really intriguing questions.
Yeah. Yeah, which is because also too, like what I'm thinking about is not only like resisting quietly, but it's also what does it mean to, because in this day and age, like resisting out loud when teachers seem to be so targeted now, like
Mhm.
what does it mean? Like, because I've also had like a professor tell me like, you're so combative, you're gonna end up getting fired. And I'm like, not fired. So
Mm,
I'm like, what does it mean to like want to also protect
mm.
yourself as a teacher in this economy, especially while you're also trying to liberate your students?
Ooh, that's interesting. Um,
Because I know you said you have a lot of support. So, that
yeah, I do. And like when you've been teaching in our district for 20 years, you make a pretty good living. Like I can't complain about that. And it's the only job I would ever want to do. And but you just said something about like you're trying to liberate your students. And I'm like, am I? I don't know if I am.
mm,
I guess I didn't necessarily like, I don't know. And that might be an interesting question to look at, but I guess I feel as though that's not necessarily my like I don't think they need me for that. I think
mm,
they're themselves, and like that would, that's an interesting it's an interesting phrasing. I need to think about that. Maybe I'm wrong on this and think about it, but I don't know. I have a few friends who I'm like, can I teach this thing or can I do this thing? And
mhm.
I will say I try to be responsive. Like if they're interested in something, then we try to like go deeper. And so like don't tell anybody, but we just like
Okay.
I randomly photocopy things that are interesting and we don't always have permission. Like I don't know, so it's like things like that where I could
Mhm,
probably every now and then be like, hey, that's not part of the mandated curriculum.
mhm,
And so you run a risk, I guess, if it goes really wrong or if somebody's like, why is that there? Why did you choose this thing?
mhm,
I don't know. I just chose it because I thought it would be interesting. Um, and I think that it's a little less risky when like people chose to take this course.
okay.
So, I'm teaching 4 other English classes, and they may have chosen to take AP Lang versus American Lit,
Mhm.
but they had to take an English class.
Yeah.
This was like people saying, no, I'm willing to devote an entire 1 year, 2 semesters to an extra AP course.
Mhm,
And so I think there's a different level of maybe like buy-in or expectation than just
mhm,
like another year of English. I could
mm,
care less sort of
mhm,
thing. Um, Not that there's like a group affinity or buy-in, but I think there would be less potential for pushback on quote controversial topics
mhm.
when kind of the expectation is like, no, I came to learn about some real things that aren't just
Yeah.
the standard like scope and sequence.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think I probably have, like I've been there for a minute. So I've been,
Mhm,
and I'm tenured and I'm a white woman. And so maybe some of that's just built in, whether
mhm,
earned or not,
mm,
I don't know.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I'll have to kind of think a little bit more about too.
I'm
You're
happy
asking me
that
all
I
these
can get you
questions.
thinking.
Yeah, I don't know.
But no, I think like liberation takes a big machine. I think it takes a lot of people. I think it takes a lot of effort. And I definitely think that you could be a part of that machine and a part of that big effort that is needed to liberate them because yeah, they can do it on their own, but there's only so much that a student and a person can do by themselves. And I think to know that they have you to back them up, like as their teacher, as somebody who chose to teach or who even got
Mhm.
picked to teach this
Mhm.
course. I think that that's like very important to their identity and to the way that they function, not only in this class, but when they do go on to go to college, when they are in these other spaces. So I think like, I'm very happy that I got your mind rolling. I got
Yeah,
the
oh,
wheels
for
rolling
sure. And
over
I'm just
here.
like, yeah, it's just this weird. We were talking today even about like movies and tropes and white
Hmm.
saviorism, and it's like, like I think I'm trying to be super cautious of like the dangerous minds narrative or the freedom writers, and it's
Hmm.
just like there's, you know, really trying to avoid all elements of that and the way that that kind of rolls out. But
Hmm. I don't
yeah,
know if I'm
that was a
supposed to say
good.
this, but I love the Freedom Riders. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So we kind of went hard on that one today, but just the idea of like the
Fair though, as you
any
should,
movie,
but
right?
yeah,
That so the argument was just like most movies that feature, even like storylines about Black youth, there's always a white savior.
that is, yeah.
And so, like the article we were is like the Help and the Blind Side
Hmm.
and even the Green Book, the critique of that was just like, well, he's got his white bodyguard and he's chilling, like he's literally
Hmm.
napping in the car. He wouldn't be able to do that. And so it was an interesting article, but you're right, because not everybody was like super on one side or the other, but it
Hmm.
was it was a really interesting discussion. I
Yeah,
mean, and a lot of it is just us like talking. And I think I've enjoyed it and I really hope that they have too. I don't know. I'm hoping
yeah,
that
no,
they
but I
have.
think that's great though that they get the freedom to actually dissect these movies in these ways. Like even was like, oh, I actually love this movie, but
Yeah, and we didn't watch them. Like we're not just
Mhm.
spending all class to watch them, but everybody's
Yeah.
kind of like familiar enough with. But yeah, who doesn't like the English teacher who just gets everybody to actually like
Right.
produce all these fat verses? Like, hey, nobody's turned anything in. Can we?
Like, how do we do this?
Right,
I'm
right,
trying to use that method in
right,
my class. Like this is inspirational for
right.
me.
I need to peer
As
at it, but nobody turned anything in. Can we get a draft for tomorrow? Like that sort of thing.
definitely.
Because that's the reality too. Like it's not all, it sounds very peachy, but it's it can be gritty, but it's lovely.
And I'm
I love
happy
teaching.
that you are in the grit and you are with your students and you are a team with them. Before we end, something that I like to ask everybody is, drop that knowledge. What is that one or two or three things or something that you want people to take away from this conversation if they remember nothing else?
Honestly, and I don't know if it came through here. I honestly think that there is no job that's more frustrating and rewarding, but also um, just better than being able to work with really cool young people
Yes.
every day. I always like one thing I think about is I'm really excited for my own children. They're kind of young still. They're like 10 and 12, but
Oh,
um I'm so excited for them to be in our school and to go to our school and to like I have hope for the future because I get to work with juniors in high school for the most part every day and it's a lot of people are like, "Oh, you teach high school? Oh, I could never." And it's just like,
it's
"No, but
always
like
that reaction.
yes, it is, right?" But I'm like, "No, I actually have faith in humanity." Like they're just a really cool group of people and this community is a cool place to teach in and again, it's not always swimming, but I love spending the days at school, which
Yeah.
is a nice thing to be able to say, like they're they're pretty fascinating people. So it's really fun to be around them every day. That would be the one
Yes.
takeaway, I
Yes,
guess.
a lot of personalities, very fascinating, and I absolutely love it. I
Yay.
truly, truly enjoy it. Didn't think I would enjoy it this much, but I enjoy it way more than I thought
And
I
you're gonna
would.
stay in Champagne forever, right now?
Maybe we'll
You
see.
should. I didn't think I was gonna, but here I am. Like, so here we are.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe. But I think what I would take from the conversation is more so like what you've been talking about is being a team with your students while also being cautious and being aware of the way that you present yourself in a classroom, while also trying to simultaneously make sure that they have that safe and open space to present themselves in whatever way they see fit, because we have to grit it out with them. So thank you so much.
Thank
I have
you.
really enjoyed talking to you
So have I.
today. That concludes this episode of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast. Peace. Oh, and Black History Month. Woo! All right.